When I was 21, my stepmother falsely accused me of assault to prevent me from inheriting my father's wealth. My dad believed her and cut me off. 7 years later, he discovered the truth. Hello, everyone. My biological parents divorced when I was 9, and they shared equal custody of me. I spent weekdays with my mom, who lived near my school, and weekends with my dad. Despite their separation, both parents were always kind and gentle towards me. While I was sad they were not together, I understood they both loved me deeply. A few years later, my dad met Gina, who would become my stepmother. When I was 11, my dad introduced her to me. She seemed nice, and my dad was clearly happy. He hoped we would get along well. Gina had twin daughters, Emma and Emily, who were 14 at the time and had been raised without their father. The twins were quite immature and would throw tantrums if they didn't get their way. As an introvert, I quietly observed their behavior. After a year of dating, my dad and Gina decided to marry when I was 12. Even my mom attended the wedding, and I was excited to have a new family member. Initially, I thought my stepmother and I got along well. However, a few months after their honeymoon, she told me one morning that she didn't really like me. She said we needed to pretend to get along for my dad's sake when he was around. When he wasn't there, she told me to stay out of her way because she couldn't stand the sight of me, as I reminded her of my mom. Hearing her harsh words broke my heart. I had genuinely liked her and hoped for a good relationship. The twins overheard her and later teased me, saying my dad didn't love me and preferred them. I remember crying and telling my mom about it. She immediately called my dad and expressed her concerns. My dad assured her that my stepmom would never say such things and that I must have misunderstood. The following weekend, when I visited my father, my stepmother appeared upset. She stayed silent in front of my dad, but as soon as he left, she angrily whispered to me, threatening that she would ensure I no longer had a dad in my life if I ever told my mom anything about her. She also warned that she would divorce my dad and take all his money, leaving him destitute, if I didn't keep quiet. At just 12 years old, I was terrified for my dad, so I nodded in agreement. From that day on, Gina made it her mission to make my life miserable in every way possible. As a child, I felt I had to endure it silently. Whenever we were alone, she would say hurtful things to me, and I would stay silent, hoping she would eventually stop bullying me. She would insult my height and weight, calling me ugly. I hoped my dad would notice, but he never did. He believed Gina and I had a good relationship and often forced me to go shopping and eat out with her and the kids. She would use my dad's credit card to pay for our meals, but wouldn't let me eat anything substantial at the restaurant. I was only allowed to have soup or dessert, no main course. I would sit there miserably, watching them finish their meals while crying quietly. I would return home hungry, and she would force me to go to bed without eating. Many nights, I cried myself to sleep, both hungry and exhausted from her cruelty. At that point, I was at my wits' end, scared, angry, and frustrated with both my stepmom and my dad. This is why I dreaded visiting my dad on weekends. Every Friday evening, I would try to avoid visiting by coming up with excuses like a stomach ache, so I could stay with my mom. My parents started noticing, and my dad would call, expressing sadness at not seeing me. My mom urged me to tell her if something was wrong, but I always kept quiet, still scared of Gina's threats. When I was 14, my dad decided to take the whole family, including me, on a trip to Greece. Initially, I didn't want to go, but my mom told me it was a good opportunity to travel and see the world, so I reluctantly agreed to join them. As usual, Gina pretended to be sweet and kind in front of my dad, asking about school as if she genuinely cared. I noticed she would subtly tease me in her sweet voice, making hurtful comments that wouldn't outright portray her as mean. For example, whenever I mentioned playing basketball, she would joke that I needed to be taller for that sport, even though I was quite tall for my age. She would then say I should focus more on my studies if I ever wanted to be successful. The twins would smirk and call me names like meathead, even though I had better grades than them. My dad would notice, but choose to ignore it. Whenever I expressed that her comments hurt me, my dad insisted she was just teasing and that I should lighten up. Gina would nod and tell my dad that I had no sense of humor and needed to learn to have fun. This continued throughout the vacation. One day, in a moment of anger, when she and the twins were teasing me about my weight while I was trying to enjoy the pool, I decided to retaliate. I told the twins that their double chins were embarrassing. Watching their faces fall, I then turned to Gina and told her she shouldn't wear a shrug over her bikini because her stomach was still visible, making her look like a penguin. Gina's face turned red with embarrassment, and she ran back to the hotel room. The twins started yelling at me, calling me sexist, and saying how horrible it was for me to say such things. Later, my dad confronted me, clearly angry. He asked if I had really spoken to my stepmother and stepsisters like that. When I admitted it, he lectured me about how he had raised me better and that I should never talk to a woman about her weight. I argued that they were criticizing my weight, looks, and height, but my dad forced me to apologize to Gina, who had locked herself in the bathroom crying after what I said. Gina and the twins made a big show of accepting my apologies. When I got home, I told my mom everything. She spoke to my dad, who tried to blame me for the whole situation. My mother threatened to call Child Protective Services on him if Gina ever commented on my weight or looks again. This scared my dad, and after that, Gina never said anything to me. However, she and the twins would blatantly ignore me whenever my dad wasn't around, which I honestly didn't mind. When I was 16, my mom went away for a few days, so I stayed with my dad and Gina. Gina complained about having to cook for one more person, so on my last night I decided to make dinner since my mom had taught me to cook from a young age to be independent. Gina wanted to invite some friends over when she heard I was cooking. I prepared the meal, set the table, and served dinner. Everyone loved the food and praised me. My dad decided to do the dishes, so I went to my room. From there, I heard Gina and her friends talking loudly outside my window. Her friends were saying how lucky she was to have a nice husband and a great house. When they mentioned how nice it was that I cooked for them, Gina went on a rant about how annoying I was and that she couldn't stand seeing my face. She told her friends she couldn't wait until I was 18, so she wouldn't have to see me every weekend. When one of her friends mentioned again how nice I seemed, Gina admitted she had hoped I would fail at cooking so she could blame me for something. This shocked me because I was trying to be polite to her, even though I knew she hated me. As time went on, Gina's dislike for me only grew. During college, when I visited my dad for a few days at his insistence, Gina would completely ignore me. She would schedule family activities with just dad and the twins or her and the twins, leaving me at home. If I woke up late during my vacation, she would yell at me, calling me lazy and inconsiderate, even though I always cleaned up after myself. I knew I was always respectful to her because my dad would be furious if I wasn't. Despite being polite and careful not to upset her, it felt like nothing I did was ever enough. My stepmother often intruded on my personal space, making me uncomfortable. She would come into my room without knocking and sometimes search through my things without explanation. She also consistently excluded me from family activities. Despite this, I tried to stay out of the way and spent time with my dad whenever I could. When I turned 21, my dad invited me to visit, saying he had important news. Although I felt a bit apprehensive, my mom encouraged me to go, believing it was good news. Upon arrival, my dad welcomed me warmly, and we drove home together. I was curious about the news, but he said he would share it during dinner. The atmosphere felt positive as the family gathered, and I looked forward to the evening. During dinner, my dad expressed how proud he was of his family. He shared that he had recently lost a friend, which made him reflect on how fortunate he was to have us. He mentioned that he had made a will, and I noticed the twins seemed intrigued. Dad explained that he was leaving the house to my stepmother, which she appreciated. Then he announced he would leave his vintage car and retirement account to me. The car held special memories for both of us, and I felt grateful for this gesture. However, as my dad spoke, I noticed a change in Gina's demeanor. The twins exchanged glances, clearly unhappy about the arrangement. Dad explained that he intended to leave the joint bank account to the twins, assuring them they would have what they needed. I thought this was fair, but the twins voiced their disappointment, expressing that they expected more support. Gina insisted that I didn't deserve as much and suggested that the twins needed more financial security. My dad stood firm in his decisions, but tensions escalated. Suddenly, Gina became emotional, claiming she had kept silent for years to protect the family, but felt she couldn't hold back any longer. The atmosphere grew tense as she made surprising allegations against me. I was taken aback by her claims, which were completely unfounded. Despite my attempts to defend myself, Gina continued to insist that I had made her uncomfortable. The situation felt surreal, and I looked to my dad for support, but he seemed conflicted, trying to process everything that was unfolding. My dad asked Gina why she hadn't spoken up sooner, and she explained that she feared no one would believe her. As the conversation spiraled, I felt trapped in a situation that had quickly turned chaotic. I was crying at this point, begging my dad not to believe her. I never imagined Gina could fabricate such awful lies, especially after what she had put me through over the years. Unfortunately, Gina's manipulation had strained my relationship with my dad, and he seemed torn between trusting me and believing his wife. The twins, influenced by their mother's narrative, supported Gina's false accusations and yelled at me to leave their house. I shouted back that it was my dad's place, and they shouldn't believe their mother's lies. Amidst the chaos, my dad looked at me and told me to leave until the matter was resolved. It felt like a punch to the gut. Being rejected by my own father, who chose to believe his second wife over me, left me hurt, confused, and betrayed. I packed my belongings and left the home I once thought was mine. I flew straight to my mother, who was shocked to see me at her doorstep. When I told her everything, she was furious and ready to confront my stepmother, but I asked her not to. I knew how unpredictable and dangerous Gina could be. If she could concoct such wild lies to get me kicked out of my dad's house over the inheritance, she could do much worse to ruin my life. I couldn't risk having her in my life any longer, which is why I decided to cut off my dad permanently. Since he chose to believe her, he didn't deserve to have me in his life. Later, my mom told me that my dad called her to express his shame in having a son like me and declared he wanted nothing to do with me. Despite her attempts to defend me, it was in vain. My dad's side of the family, convinced by Gina's story, also attacked my mom, accusing her of raising a bad kid. I can't even begin to fathom the pain my mom felt hearing such words about her son. The damage was done, and Gina had won. I wish I could say my life improved after cutting her off, but it didn't. Gina and the twins continued bombarding me with hurtful messages, threatening that I should stay away from my dad forever. It got so bad that I had to change my number to escape them. Even after that, things didn't get better. Gina's actions left me terrified of being around any women, fearing I would be falsely accused again and lose my job and career. I was scared to meet anyone or go on dates. Throughout this ordeal, my mom stood by me and believed me. I went through severe depressive episodes, and my mom flew in to stay with me for a couple of months to make sure I was okay. Slowly, my mental health improved, and I started to rebuild my life. Eventually, I met a wonderful woman named Mara, who brought joy back into my life. She has completely changed my outlook, and my mom adores her. Mara and my mom mean everything to me, and thanks to them, I continue to live my life with purpose. Just a week ago, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it might be a delivery service, I answered. To my shock, it was my dad. I was stunned to hear his voice after nearly 7 years. He sounded older. When I asked how he got my new number, he dodged the question and asked if I was doing okay. I remained silent and then told him not to bother me again since I had nothing to say to him. That's when my dad broke down and started crying. He begged for my forgiveness, admitting how wrong he was to abandon his own son. My curiosity was piqued, so I waited for him to explain. My dad then revealed that Gina had been cheating on him with his best friend for years. When he confronted her with proof, she stopped hiding and confessed she was tired of being married to him. Gina admitted she had only married him for his money and despised being with him. When my dad pressed her further, she confessed to fabricating all the accusations against me because she wanted his wealth for herself and her daughters. As you can imagine, my dad divorced her, and she got nothing from the marriage due to her affair. Despite her lawyers fighting for alimony, my dad said he had been waiting to divorce Gina so he could officially reach out to me and apologize for what he put me through. He expressed his desire to make up for lost time and rebuild our father-son relationship. At the mention of father and son, I couldn't help but scoff. I told him that he was no father of mine after how quickly he abandoned me for his wife's accusations. I said I wanted nothing to do with him and that he should stop bothering me. I ended the call, hoping he got the message. Since then, I've been bombarded with calls from my dad and his side of the family, who I don't even talk to, saying that my dad has suffered enough and that I'm making it harder on him. Their messages leave me feeling conflicted. Am I the bad guy for refusing to talk to my dad after he cut me off due to Gina's false accusations? Update: my post was locked, but hopefully it's okay now. I've posted the link and tried my best with spacing. I'm on mobile. To everyone who offered support and advice, thank you so much. Your words helped me see things more clearly. I'm not just furious at my dad for believing my stepmother over me, but also for all those years she harassed me while he did nothing to protect me. I was just a child, and she blackmailed and manipulated me while I kept quiet. I think it's time I open up to my mom and let her know exactly what I went through because I know she'll understand. Update 2. Hi, everyone. It's been a week since my last update. For those concerned about my mental health, I'm doing okay. Thank you for your kindness. I booked tickets for my mom to come visit me so I could tell her and Mara everything. They already sensed something was up. I started by telling them about Dad's contact after all these years, which shocked my mom. She asked why he reached out, and I explained. She had no idea he had gone through a divorce and was furious at Gina for what she put everyone through. Then I told them about how Gina would manipulate me when I was just 12 years old. I recounted how she bullied me when Dad wasn't around and threatened to divorce him if I ever told him. I didn't realize how traumatic these events were until I began to open up about them one by one. By the time I finished, I had tears streaming down my face, and Mara and my mom were crying quietly as well. My mom immediately hugged me repeatedly, saying that I shouldn't have kept this all in and that it was okay to share. I cried for half an hour while my mom held me. Mara also told me that no child should have gone through what I did, and that it was completely fine if I chose never to speak to my dad again since he should have protected me. My mom nodded, saying I had no obligations to explain anything to my dad because when I needed him the most, he chose to believe his wife over me. The only reason he was reaching out now was that he was lonely and had no family left. That's when I realized they were right. My dad perhaps never really loved me because if he did, he would have never believed I was capable of such things. Since then, I felt much lighter after sharing my past with Gina out loud with my mom and Mara. I've blocked my dad and will continue to block any other family member who tries to interject in my life. I owe no explanations to those who chose to abandon me. Update 3. Wow, it's been 6 months since I wrote this post, and I can't believe how much my life has changed since then. I want to start by sharing some happy news. I proposed to Mara, and she said yes. My mom is thrilled for us, and we're considering moving closer to her because the schools are better there. Since both of us can work from anywhere, it makes sense for our future family. Thanks to advice from people on Reddit, I've also started therapy. It's helping me feel better step by step. I'm trying to focus on the positive aspects of my life, like Mara and my mom. They've always been there for me, and I'm deeply grateful for their support. The past has been tough, but I'm looking forward to a brighter future, free from all the lies and drama.